A father is trying to save his children. The ladder he keeps against the house, the one that's always there, is gone. His 2 trucks worked perfectly yesterday. Tonight, neither one will start. By morning, the house is gone. 5 of his children are inside of it. And when investigators sift through the ashes, they find nothing. No bones, no teeth, no trace that 5 children were ever there at all. 1 child survived that night, who was only 2 years old. She would spend the next 75 years of her life trying to find out what happened to her brothers and sisters. Some cases close. These never did. This is Tales Gone Cold. Fayetteville, West Virginia, Christmas Eve, 1945. George and Jenny Sodder lived 2 miles outside of town with their children. George had come over from Italy as a boy, built a trucking company from nothing, and raised one of the most respected families in the county. That night, the house was full. 9 of their 10 children were home. Only their oldest son was missing, away serving in the army. It had been a good night. The oldest daughter, Marion, had bought toys for the younger kids with money from her job at the dime store. The children begged to stay up late and play. Their mother said yes, as long as the boys remembered to feed the chickens and bring in the cows before bed. She took the baby, 2-year-old Sylvia, upstairs, and they went to sleep. At midnight, the phone rang. Jenny went down to answer it. A woman's voice she didn't recognize asked for a name she'd never heard. In the background, laughter. The clink of glasses. A party somewhere. Jenny told her she had the wrong number and hung up. Something felt off. The light downstairs were still on. The curtains were pulled shut, something only the last person to bed would do. She found Marion asleep on the couch and assumed the other children had gone up to the attic without turning anything on. She went back to bed. Then, around 1 in the morning, she heard it. Something hit the roof. A loud bang. And then a sound like something rolling across the shingles. She listened. Silence. She went back to sleep. 30 minutes later, she woke up coughing. The room was filling with smoke. Downstairs, in the room George used as an office, the room with the fuse box and the telephone wires, there was a fire. George and Jenny got out. So did Marion. The 2 oldest boys and little Sylvia, 6 of them, standing in the freezing yard. But the staircase was already a wall of flame. The other 5 children slept in the attic, and there was no way up. Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5. What happened next is a part no one has ever explained. George ran for the ladder he always kept against the house. It wasn't there. He ran for his trucks to climb up and reach the attic windows. Neither of the trucks would start. He tried to scoop water from a rain barrel. It was frozen solid. He clawed at the wall with his bare hands until his arm was slick with blood. His daughter ran to the neighbor to call the fire department. The operator never answered. A second neighbor drove all the way into town to find the fire chief by hand. The fire station was 2.5 miles away. The trucks didn't arrive until 8 o'clock the next morning. By then, there was nothing left but a smoking hole in the ground. The fire had leveled the entire house in about 45 minutes. The fire chief told the Sodders the blaze must have been hot enough to completely cremate the children's bodies. The coroner ruled it an accident. Faulty wiring. Death certificates were issued 5 days later. That should have been the end of it. But here's what makes this case so much stranger. The Sodders could not accept that their children had simply burned away to nothing, and the deeper they looked, the less the official story held together. Start with the fire itself. As they sifted the ruins, they found household appliances barely damaged, pieces of the tin roof still recognizable. If the fire wasn't hot enough to destroy a kitchen stove, how was it hot enough to leave not one single bone from their children? Ginny became obsessed with that question. She started burning animal bones in her own stove to test it. They never fully burned away. A crematorium operator told her the truth. Even at 2,000 degrees for 2 hours, human bones remained. Their house had burned in 45 minutes. She found another account of another house fire from around the same time, one that killed a family of 7. In that fire, every one of the 7 skeletons were recovered. 7 bodies found. 5 Sodder children gone without a trace. It made no sense. Then the clues started piling up. The missing ladder turned up that spring at the bottom of an embankment 75 feet from the house. Someone had moved that. The telephone repairman examined the line, told him it hadn't burned through at all. It had been cut by someone who climbed 14 feet up the pole to do it. A man had been taking equipment from the Sodder property around the time of the fire. He was arrested, admitted to the theft, and even admitted to cutting a line, but said he had thought that was the power line and swore he had nothing to do with the fire. Why a thief would stop to cut the famous phone line on his way out has never been explained. And a bus driver came forward with something he'd seen that Christmas Eve. As he drove his route past the house, he watched figures throwing what he described as balls of fire at the roof. Months later, when the snow melted, little Sylvia found a hard green rubber object in the yard. George, who remembered the thump on the roof that night, thought it looked like a military incendiary device, a small firebomb. Now think back to the weeks before the fire. That fall, a man had come by looking for work. He wandered around back, pointed at the fuse boxes, and said, "This is going to cause a fire someday." George thought it was bizarre. He'd just had the house rewired, and the power company had called it perfectly safe. And before that, an insurance salesman George had turned away left him with a warning. He said that house will go up in smoke, and the children would be destroyed because of the things George had been saying about Mussolini. George was an outspoken man. He'd left Italy and never stopped criticizing the dictator. And in the weeks before Christmas, older sons had noticed a strange car parked along the highway. Its occupants watching the younger children walk home from school. Then came the sightings. A woman watching the fire that night said she saw children peering out of passing cars as the house burned. A motel owner between Fayetteville and Charleston said 5 children matching the Sodders came in for breakfast on Christmas morning, driven by adults who watched them closely. Another witness, a week later, reported 4 of the children in a vehicle with strangers. The Sodders begged for help. George wrote to the FBI. The reply came back. The matter appeared to be local, outside the Bureau's authority. The state held hearings, then closed the case as hopeless. There was one more strange turn. Years on, the fire chief told the family he'd recovered something from the ashes after all, and led George to a spot where he buried a small metal box. They dug it up and brought it to the funeral director to examine. Inside was not the remains of a child. It was a fresh beef liver, meat that had never been touched by the fire. The story that went around town afterward was that the chief had planted it, hoping the grieving family would finally believe their children had died and let the search go. So George and Jenny did the only thing left to them. They refused to stop looking. They put a billboard up on the highway. 5 faces, 5 names. A reward for anyone who knew anything. For decades, every car that passed through Fayetteville saw those children looking back at them. And in 1968, more than 20 years after the fire, the billboard finally got an answer. Jenny went to the mail and found an envelope addressed only to her, postmarked from Kentucky. No return address. Inside was a photograph of a man in his mid-20s. Dark curly hair, dark eyes, the same nose, the same upward tilt of the left eyebrow that their son Louis had. Louis, who was 9 years old the night he disappeared. On the back in handwriting, just a few cryptic words. Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie. And then a string of numbers that no one has ever decoded. The Sodders hired a private investigator and sent him to Kentucky to find the man in the photo. He was never heard from again. They added the picture to the billboard anyway and hung an enlargement over their fireplace, where it stayed for the rest of their lives. They never found him. They never found any of them. George Sodder died in 1969, the year after the photograph arrived. Jenny kept the search alive for 2 more decades, tending a flower garden over the spot where the house once stood, until she passed in 1989. Only then did the billboard finally come down, but the search didn't end with them. Remember the 2-year-old who escaped that night? Her name was Sylvia. She grew up, raised a family of her own, and never once believed her brothers and sisters died in that fire. And to her final years, she spent her nights online, talking with anyone still working the case, still chasing the same questions her parents had. Sylvia Sodder died in 2021. At the age of 79, she was the last person alive who was in the house on Christmas Eve, 1945. and she went to her grave certain that somewhere, somehow, the truth was still out there. So what actually happened? Some investigators believe the simplest answer is the hardest one, that the children did die that night, and that grief drove a heartbroken family to see the patterns in a string of terrible coincidences. But the coincidences are hard to wave away. A cut phone line, a ladder thrown down a hill, 2 trucks dead on the same night, a fire that spared the kitchen but erased 5 children. In a town with deep Italian roots, where some have long whispered that George's loud politics drew the attention of the Sicilian mafia and that the children were taken to send a message. No remains were ever identified. No suspect was ever charged. No one has ever explained the man in the photograph. 80 years later, the Sodder children are still missing. The case of the Sodder children is wide open. So here's the question I want you to sit with, down in the comments. If those 5 children died in the fire, where are the bones? And if they didn't, who took them? And why did someone want George Sodder to stop talking? If this one got under your skin, the next one will too. I'll see you in the next file.